Okay, that looks like it might be working. Shows up as starting. Time elapsed. Hey, there we go. That was a whole bunch of fun. I actually had to go all the way to Wireshark to figure out what exactly was going wrong in the streaming software. Alright. So we'll see how well this works. See, I'll hang out here for a minute or two just to let people hop on since we didn't start on time today. Turns out that my screen recording software decided to try and append the file name in a really odd way. Which was making YouTube get very confused. There we go. Okay, I'm quiet. Let me turn on my audio. That would be book devices. That right there. Okay. Does that sound better? Testing, 1, 2. Is this any better? Okay, testing. Is this better? Okay, cool. Let me know. This is the first time I've messed with my audio system like this. I'm doing some weird piping through Pulse Audio to get this working. All right, let's give it another minute and a half just for people to trickle in. So I've been just kind of walk around, show off some of the changes to the base. I've set this up for the demo today. So I moved, if you watched the stream last time, I moved my actual bedroom up here. I'll decorate that at some point. But I've just set up this basic loop for testing and hooked it up to the computer. I'll try not to do too much programming because I could do that for hours and hours and you guys don't want to watch that. Or maybe you do. If you guys want to watch me program at some point, let me know and I'll consider it. Let's see. Checking the stream comments. Stream is kind of healthy. Hopefully this will work okay. Video resolution is not optimal. Okay, that's fine. All right. Let's see. I've got a pull up list of what I was going to cover today. I'm all frazzled due to the streaming software not being super happy. Okay. So I figure I'll tool around, talk about some of the 1.0 changes, answer any questions that you guys might have, go over some of the known issues, go over some of the Augment stuff, which I get a ton of questions online about. So this whole thing over here is new if you watched one of the previous streams. I think part of the facade of the building was up, but that was about it. So I spent a bunch of time in the past week or so just messing around and making this place look presentable. I've laid, I think, 5 or 6 kilometers of track just for fun. This is pretty loud. Let me know if you guys can't hear me over the sound of the locomotives. So set up a basic switch yard over here. All right, so for 1.0, a lot of the big changes, let's see. Okay, so someone just asked, when is the next update going to be coming out? Now that I've regained some of my sanity after the 1.0 release, that'll probably be, I think I'll be doing a patch release in a month or two. There's a couple minor issues and I think one, maybe 2 dupe issues with inventories that I want to sort out. So I'll be going through and taking care of that. But the push toward 1.0 that really wore me out. I was fixing 10, 20 bugs a day and adding new features constantly. All right, so let's see. During the last stream I'm trying to go back and figure out. I had a whole plan today of what I was going to cover, and I got all messed up. So since the last recording, I've added with 1.0, I added all these new sounds you hear. Hopefully here, if I set everything up correctly. The Augment system is much more powerful. I'll be going over most of the augments in depth. Computer integration, some of the basics of that I'll be covering. We've got new stock, so I can pull up that list. There's a whole new casting system. One of the things I promised in the last stream was that I would fix the user interface, and I've done that. Let's see. So first of all, you can actually see how much metal you've got, which is this part of the UI, and you can see how much metal has been poured into the cast that's been going on here. So we've got a couple different options here, and I'll be using this UI and showing how some of the different pieces fit together. So you open this up, you can either choose a rail casting, one of the augments, or click on a specific part of one of the locomotives. I've also made this UI larger because it was a little bit hard to tell what part was what. One thing that I may change at some point is these all show up as standard gauge, even though I've got a specific gauge selected here. I was noticing that when I was making some of the models. So I figured one of the surprises today is I've got, I think, just enough room here, and I've got a bunch of reserved steel. I think I'm going to try and make a big boy as part of this stream, and I'll use that, I'll go into that now, because I want to go over some of the heat up and cool down mechanics, because those have changed quite a bit. And once I go through that, I'll hop through the config, and I'll just breeze through a bunch of the options, point out the things you might want to take a look at, that sort of stuff. I'm going to take some of the fuel out of the locomotive upstairs, A, so we don't hear it, and B, because to balance out diesel versus steam, I changed it so that diesel locomotives constantly burn just a little bit of fuel. And I also tweaked by default how much diesel they burned, and just going over the list of things that I've changed. I also changed, but rather I support, I think, all the Buildcraft fuels, and so I know I support Buildcraft, Immersive Petrolium, and Immersive Enginnering fuels, and whatever has fuels compatible with that, it should work. That should work. So I did some math earlier. I think it was 28 blocks of steel that I need for this. Let's see, looking at the stream comments. Turntable, yes. Turntable would make a lot of the stuff that I've been playing with here easier. And I think I was sitting back after the 1.0 and thinking and trying to figure out how the heck I would do a turntable, and I think I've got a plan now. I'm not sure if that plan will actually work, but there's a chance of it. Let's start off by tossing half the steel in here. There we go. Let's see, how's my memory doing? That's pretty happy. So if my audio's a little bit choppy, let me know. I'm not sure there's anything I can do about it, but I still haven't bought a better microphone. I'm currently streaming the audio through my laptop and combining it using, it's this weird setup that's just barely holding itself together. All right, so one of the most requested things of the last stream was to make a 4000 class locomotive. So as before, where we start is we grab the frame, and I forget which, okay, that's the frame. So we do single casting. And for a lot of these parts, we're just going to do single casting for now. And you can hear the sound effects, which I'm not sure you can hear them over me. Or hear me over them. So angled pistons, yes, that will be, that's slated for 2.0. All right, so that's finished. Let's do, I think I've got enough room here. Yep, Yeah, after playing this on the stream and going through and making Rails, I realized how needed a redesign of this was. Actually, I got to give a shout out to Nonsanity. I'll put a, well, I might put a, I can put a link in the description after I publish the video. He's done a bunch of UI work for a bunch of other people in the past in a professional setting, and he was nice enough to give me pointers on this interface. Some of the layout stuff, I as a programmer see things more as okay, I can get a button on the screen and I know how to make it work, and I know how to do all the complex stuff behind it, but actually making a user interface that flows well, that's something that I'm by no means an expert at. So he was really nice and gave me some pointers when I was developing this. Okay, next part is the front frame. And you can see it's going to cost 66 ingots of steel here. So that's actually going to use up a ton. So we click single casting, and it pours it out. And I'll step back because that's very loud. All right. Dustpole, I have not started on that side project yet. I have been enjoying playing Minecraft and not making mods. Let's see, how's this going? Yeah, it's pouring. Let's see. There we go. So that's on there. It looks like we have just enough room in here. It's almost like I planned it that way. Let me go grab a wrench. Let's see. I'm on a private server. At some point I might open this up, but right now it's just a kind of a quiet place for me to hang out and play with stuff. Here's the wrench. One bug in 1.0 is, in theory, it should Immersive Railroading should not require steel of any sort as a hard dependency. Unfortunately, that's not true for the item recipes. So if you play in a world that doesn't have steel production, a bunch of the item recipes don't work and you'll have to hack something in there. Due to the way that Forge handles recipes, I'm not entirely sure there's a way around it. I'll be playing with that for 2.0, but that might just be something where you should probably have steel if you're going to be doing immersive railroading, and if you really want to work around it, you can. Let's see, ceiling? That I actually tested. Okay, so we're going to need the steam chests next. Alright, let's do the front one. And there we go. Let's see. It's hitting 30. We'll see. Well, my graphics card's keeping up for the most part. Let's see. All right, so we're gonna need. Let's do the driving wheels, because those are actually quite nice. So let's set this to repeat casting. So 1, pour, 2, pour, set that back to single, pour again, and there we go. So for that example where we're just making 4, it wasn't really needed to do the repeat casting, but once we get to some of the different rods, that becomes much more useful. All right, so we've got. So we did the wheels front. Let's do rear wheels. Let's just do single casting for now, because that's easier for me. Okay. I promise this won't take up the whole stream, but this locomotive is very good for illustrating. It's very good for illustrating some of the fun bits and pieces of the new heating and cooling system. Let's see. New question: how did you implement the Garrett? That's a good question. Essentially, what my code does is it breaks apart so the modelers submit a model. Let me step back because that's a little bit noisy. So the modelers submit a model, and what they do is they name each component specifically. So this is like bogie rear wheel. Sorry. This is drive wheel rear 1, drive wheel rear 2, so on and so forth. And what my code does is based on how you say this is like, so for example, this is a Mallet articulated locomotive. Though I guess it's same pressure in both cylinders, so it's not traditional Mallet. Anyways, what the modelers do is they say this is the animation style is X, and my code knows to say, okay, if it's X, then I'm supposed to have these components, and this is how they fit together. So I write a bunch of really awful trigonometry to figure out how all the pieces fit together dynamically, and then that's what gets animated to the screen. So once the modelers get me a Garrett locomotive with all the parts named correctly, then I can go through and add the animation system. That's probably just copying my existing code and hacking it to get it working. All right, so what did we need? We needed bogie front, bogie rear, and 2 of each of the bogie wheels. That's going to be 2 of these. And 2 of these. And bogie rear. And now you can see we've got the components in. And if you're wondering about playing this in single player, this is probably one of, if not the most complex locomotive in the game to build. So most of the time, you're doing a fraction of this. The diesels are very simple, and the steam locomotives are usually are a little bit more complex, and then the articulated locomotives, there's just a ton of parts to make. All right. So we need 4 of all of the rods. 2, 3, 4, and you, 1, 2, 3. For doing a really quick cast like this, it's a little bit harder to get it's harder to do the repeat mode. Primarily because it happens so quickly that you soon overshoot what parts you wanted to make. And if you accidentally make parts that you don't end up needing, you can just toss them back in and they'll melt down. So we did the union link, combination lever, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. We're almost there. Expansion link. 1, 2. All right. Okay, we got some comments online. Yeah, a Minecraft model exported as OBJ would work as long as it was broken up into the right components. That's some of the harder parts, is lining up all these different components. And typically, this is probably the most complex. Like the, I think this is the Firefly over here. This is a much, much simpler model. You have to make, let me take this apart. So shift click. You've got to make 2 wheels, a driving wheel, and you need a little bit of steel plate. Let's see. Yeah. When can you expect M-buffer track pieces? Maybe for 1.0. Oh, sorry, 2.0. I'm so used to saying maybe for 1.0 that I gotta get out of that habit. Yeah, the experimental buffer pack, that's a pretty fun hack that I think Wrong Weekend did to the physics system. It's pretty clever. Yeah. All right. So we just did the combination levers. Okay, so we need 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. Almost there. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we can't put these on the locomotive yet because we need to run them through the steam hammer. Let me go grab another hopper real quick just to make this go a little bit quicker. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to walk in Minecraft and read comments at the same time is not an easy task. So if you see me walking into stuff, it's usually because I'm trying to keep an eye on what's going on in the comments. I've got these Immersive Enginnering lights set up. They should prevent mobs from spawning within a 32 block radius. Okay. Let's do that. Apparently I left some rails in there. Forgot about that. Alright, so what we can do... That's really loud. Sorry. Yep. I'm just going to let that be over there until it quiets down. So let's switch this to standard gauge. We're going to need some boiler segments. I did this ahead of time, so I know I need 4 of them. So we're going to do big boy boilerplate and plop one on here. That's 1. For 2.0, I'll have a distinct sound for each of the machines. All right, and 4. God, these machines are loud. I'm still working on the balance between the different audio devices. Yeah. Yeah, 2.0 for the new animations. You can see I've got some plans in there, so it should be to the point where the boiler roller will actually roll it back and forth and curl the sheet around. Okay. Silence. There we go. So these are done. And now let's put in the last couple. And plug you in. Ow. Okay. What are we missing? So that's just those there. So I need radius, eccentric. Okay, I'm missing some. I also need some large steel plates. I think I've got some of those handy over here. Let's see. Medium plate, large plate standard. Oh, that is quiet. So I think I missed a piece, and it'll tell me in just a sec. A lot of people have asked for JEI integration. I'll probably get to that at some point, but it's considering that it's not a process that fits super well in it's it's not something that's terribly high on my list. That's maybe 2.0, probably 3.0 if I'm being honest. All right, so I missed the radius bar. Let me fix that real quick. All right, radius bar, radius bar, radius bar. This one. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and something I didn't mention is all of the steel in the mod should actually no, I did bring this up. Sorry. All the steel is ore dictionaried, and you can use ingots as well. So if I want to just toss in, we're at 18 now, toss in 2, melts it down to 20. Okay, and we've got 2, so we need 5 more large plates. These are set to large plate. OpenFlexitrack should be. Right now, I've got a pull request open just to start getting the So OpenFlexitrack was originally developed by Don Bruce and a bunch of the ZND, I know a few people from ZNDR, or at least they have worked on the code in the past, and they're looking to use OFT for their trains. So they've made some modifications. I've put in a pull request, which is a thing saying, hey, I want to make changes. And they're going through right now and reviewing that code, and once that gets merged in, OpenFlexitrack will support Immersive Railroading, but it's still a very work in progress mod. There's a lot of pieces that need to be done before it can actually see the light of day as a full release. A lot of the core components are there, but it needs testing, it needs different track scales. We've been talking about that a little bit. Zeno's got some good ideas there. But anyways, it's in progress. It'll happen eventually, probably before 2.0. I'll be going over a little bit of the OpenComputer code. I'll probably do that last, just because that's probably the most tedious part of all this. We've got the locomotive. I still have a little bit of steel left over. So this takes 95 buckets, and I'm going to grab 1 or 2 buckets, and you'll see why in just a sec. I'm also going to sleep through the night just to make sure that nothing decides to wander in. If you look up in the corner of the screen here, I'm using, I believe it's the Extended Days mod. No, it's either Extended Days or Too Much Time, whichever one's the one on 1.12. But that's been nice, because the Minecraft days are really short, and if you're taking a long journey to go to a mine, it's it can feel like you're constantly like hopping off the train and sleeping. So right now I think the days last 40 minutes, which is usually enough for me to go out, complete a task, and come back. I was going to grab stuff from one of my chests. Let's see, left buckets. I'm going to make a bunch more buckets. I'm going to make 1 more bucket. That should be enough anyways. And let's grab a stack of wood. This, by the way, the way I'm going to be demonstrating this is, so you know how you'll go into science class at school, or you'll watch a TV show and say, hey kids, don't try this at home. I'm an expert, I know how the code works, I know what I'm doing. And even still, there's a small chance that I may end up blowing up part of this building. So what I'm about to do is not recommended, but it does work, and it does very well illustrate how the new heat up and cool down mechanics work. Set up over here. It's going to get very loud in here. I also have I think it's not dynamic surroundings. You know what I'll do is I'll put a list of all the mods I'm running in the chat, or in the description of the video at the end. Actually, you know what? Hang on. Mod options. What is it called? Sound filters. I cannot recommend sound filters enough. It makes everything sound so much better in Minecraft. Audio's not super happy. All right. Yeah, I did just finish this building, looking at the comments yesterday, so we'll see if I can turn it into rubble. I do have world backup, so I probably end up just restoring to that. So we're going to put 1 bucket of water in. This is something, let me repeat, you do not want to do. I'm just going to break all these up into sticks. The reason why I'm doing sticks, even though it's slightly less efficient, is I can pull them out very, very quickly without worrying about extended burn time. So let's do 3 slots. And you can see our temperature down here is going to shoot way up. Let me look up like that so you can see that a little bit better. And right now it's shooting up really fast, but what's going to happen is it's going to slow down. I looked up a bunch of thermodynamics, and depending on the temperature gradient between the boiler itself and the surrounding air, it changes how much heat needs to be applied and how much heat is radiated from the boiler. So it makes some rough guesstimates as far as what the surface area of the boiler is, figures out how much heat that radiates, and then takes that into account when it's when it's figuring out how much the locomotive is cooling down every tick. I'm not an engineer. I'm a computer scientist that does software engineering, but I'm not what you would traditionally think of as a software engineer. My physics is fairly rudimentary, and if any of you have gone through college and have gotten like a mechie degree or any sort of degree where you have to take a bunch of physics classes like thermodynamics, feel free to come take a look at my code. I know I'm doing some stuff wrong, but it tends to work well enough for the moment. All right, so you can see the heat up is actually slowing down now. That's because the heat that the boiler is radiating due to the temperature differential is increasing significantly. So let's start burning in a couple more slots and refill these slots. There we go. And just because I'm feeling a little bit dangerous, let's do this. Temperature skyrocketing again. And what's going to happen is it's going to start building up pressure, but at the same time, the boiler is going to continue heating up. What's supposed to happen, if you have enough water, is the temperature pegs at 100 degrees Celsius and doesn't go beyond that. Because at that point, all of the heat that's being generated is going into steam production. The problem is when the water is low enough, you're putting a huge amount of heat into the crown sheet in the locomotive, and if the crown sheet gets to a high enough temperature, the locomotive will explode, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. So, all right. You can see the temperature is still climbing, which is, if you're in a normal locomotive, what you absolutely do not want. But it's working. And we're running out of water really quickly. This is runs by the seat of your pants. But the good news is the temperature's dropping. We're still running a little bit low on water. So the reason why it's pressurizing so quickly, and I gotta be really careful because this is not stable. The reason why it's pressurizing so quickly is it's only heating a single bucket of water at right now. Woo, that's noisy. Alright, let's put a little bit more water in, and do that. There we go. It's overheating a little bit. So I'm gonna have to park it soon. Okay, so what's happening is the way it calculates how much pressure is produced is it takes the amount of heat generated by each item that's burning, combines that, and then figures out how much is being applied. Sorry, this is really noisy. I'm going to park the locomotive and stop doing this. Alright, let's see. I can't see. Oop. Alright, so I'm going to take all this out and let it start cooling down. There's a bug right now where you can see how the pressure is dropping, but the overpressure sound is still on. That's the sound of the pressure valves popping. Problem solved. Okay, so getting back to this, I'll place this back down. All right. So, continuing where I left off now that it's a little bit quieter in here. The amount of steam generated is proportional to the amount of water in the boiler, and so it's inverse to the amount of water in the boiler, funnily enough, and the amount of heat generated. So the more steam is generated from more heat, that makes sense. But the less water in the boiler, the more steam is generated, because you're using the same amount of heat to you're using the same amount of heat on a smaller quantity of water. I'm not sure if that's actually correct physics or not, but that seemed right to me. Dustpaul asks, can you throw a whole train with a casting basin? You can't. That would make you very, very unhappy. Let's see. So, all right. So those are the initial mechanics I wanted to go over. What else is new for heat up and cool down? I think just to mention that I've balanced most of these, so usually with all slots burning, the locomotive should be able to easily keep itself at max pressure. And they all roughly heat up the same at the same speed. So okay, that's something good to mention, is the number of slots in the firebox correspond, so it's the ratio between the number of slots in the firebox and the total amount of water that the boiler can hold determines how quickly the boiler will heat up. So most of the locomotives are at about a 1-to-1 ratio, though some are a little bit higher, some are a little bit lower. Like the switcher, this one heats up pretty quickly. I'm actually going to heat this up just for fun because I want to demonstrate something later. Let's do this and that, and you can see this one has a full boiler and it's taken quite a while to heat up. But by the time we come back to it, it might be roasty toasty. All right. Oh, here's something else to mention: is dismounting works a little bit better now. So, sitting on this side, hop off. Standing on this side, hop off. Look at that. I know that was frustrating a lot of people earlier. Let me hop over and look at some of the comments. Yeah, so Samuel asks, if you make this the temperatures too high, can you make it go down back with water? Yep. If it's too high, take all the fuel out, put as much water in as you can, and wait for it to come back down. Let's see. Don't go a little cold. Time to, yep, temperature shoots right up. Yeah, that's pressure going up so fast. Yep. Okay. Dink London asks, is the separation between reverser and throttle planned at all? Yes. At some point I'll be doing an advanced controls config option. So by default in the model, I'll probably keep this as the base level because this is convenient. This is what people are used to if they're playing with model trains and such. But on a real locomotive, there's a lot more controls, and I plan on adding a lot of those controls over time. But those will usually be hidden behind a config option, just because a lot of people have different levels of realism. That'll also probably go along with the idea of part wear and tear, where over time the parts will break and you'll have to disassemble the locomotive, repair parts, and put them back together. That I'm hoping to get in for 2.0. And I think I could get at least some of the advanced controls in for 2.0. I've got to go through and make the final list of what's going to go in to 2.0 in the next month or two. Let's see, out of control heat. Let's see, damage rooted components. Yep, just talked about that. I removed the T1. The Iron Duke should be in. Let me see. Yeah, Iron Duke's right there. That's in 1.0. The T1 was removed because it was too high poly count and the model wasn't finished. But one thing you've noticed probably is going to 1.0, the game loads up a lot faster. I've taken the heaviest models and moved them out into resource packs. That was a few Legends models. It wasn't anything personal, and if I could have kept them in there, I would have, but my first priority is making sure that Immersive Railroading runs on most computers. I can't say all because that's never going to happen, but yeah, there's even with so I've essentially written my own rendering pipeline for all this. None of the stuff you see here is actually being rendered as Minecraft intends. I have one entity. Let me do F3B. Can I see it? I can't actually see it. How do we turn those off? Okay. But right in front of your face at all times is actually a hidden entity, which is rendering all of the Immersive Railroading track and models, which is which is not the way you're supposed to do it. But it ends up being the only way that I can get the rendering system working with A, the performance, and B, without a bunch of the Forge bugs. Either Forge or Minecraft. I actually suspect it's probably Minecraft under the hood. So Minecraft's got a bug, and Forge doesn't provide a hook that I need, and I'm not going to bother because it's a fairly niche case. Okay, that's why the T1 was removed. Let's see. Someone was asking about names and specific augments to those names. So I'll be going over that a little bit in the OpenComputers segment. With plain augments, probably not. Augments plus OpenComputers, definitely. That's already up and running. Handbrake car be made more efficient? Possibly. I may have a config option for that. I'm not entirely sure. Controls for the rail driver. I'm not sure what you mean by rail driver. Finding abandoned locomotives? Probably not. I am planning on adding a villager which trades emeralds for model trains. So MC Wizard is asking about 3 green trains. Now there's 2. One probably went into a resource pack. I forget which one. I'm not planning on adding any major world gen at this point. I've got enough. So this mod is already 23,000 lines of code. And there's still a ton of features to add in subsequent versions. So World Gen is not something I'm planning on doing at any point. As cool as that would be. All right, let's see how this locomotive's coming along. It's getting there. I'll leave that there to heat up for a little bit. All right. So now that we've gone over some of the practical uses for the heat system, let's go over some of the mod options. And this might be a little bit Real driver. Okay. So that's like a DCC style control. So. Let's see. So I've actually built my own DCC controller before, and but networked control of these, I'm not sure. I think at this point the plan is to leave it all under the OpenComputers bonnet for now, just because there's only so much I can do in the base mod. Let's see, someone's asking, can I add the Mallard? A bunch of the A4s are definitely on the agenda. I may add, so I've got the Peppercorn, the A1 Peppercorn. I'll probably finish that model and then make a couple variants and release that as a resource pack at some point. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I do have a ton of coal I could use, but most of that's in steel production. Okay, so so I'm not as distracted. Let's go into mod options and immersive railroading. And the first thing to note is in 1.11 and 1.12, all of this stuff works fine. In 1.10, there isn't an easy way of syncing this UI with the config on the file system. So in 1.10, edit the configs. Don't open up this UI. This UI doesn't do what you think it does. Let's see, Samuel's Sleeth. I mean, if you do some internet sleuthing, you can find a picture of me in a boat, and I'll leave it at that. So someone's asking about the resource packs. They can do anything from retexture a model to rebuild a model to override it to look differently, or you can add brand new ones. You can even remove trains in resource packs. Hey, that just hit pressure. Let's see. All right, so let's go through this. So let's go through the simple ones. Sound. So override sound channels. This is if you get a really weird sound crash. I've never actually seen this happen, but because the big boy at full speed is going to be a ridiculous amount of noise happening. The way that Minecraft configures the underlying Pulse audio sound system is in a very naive fashion. So I go through and I override that, and I think I set like a couple thousand audio channels. So that when you're at like in the T1 at high speed or any of the articulated locomotives at a 60, 100 miles an hour, you don't hear stop, stop, stop. At least you don't hear that as much. You still hear it a little bit, but it's a lot better. Sound distance scale. So this, and I think there's tooltips for most of this. I'm going to have a quick glass of water. All right, so sound distance scale. Right now, it's at 1.0. That's just the default. If you double this value, that'll mean sound carries twice as far. So if you're on a server and you want to hear you want people to hear your whistle miles out, set this to like a 4 or a 5. And it changes the distance at which the sound drops off down and fades away. You can turn sound off altogether. For people on lower resourced computers, sometimes that helps. Because I do the locomotives and all the stock have something called Doppler shift enabled. So I on the fly calculate that Doppler shift effect and apply it every tick. So that's when you hear the train combine, it goes so the coming toward you is pitched up, going away from you is pitched down. So that can use up a few CPU cycles and slow stuff down a little bit. Sound pressure valve. So that, I think if you turn that off, you don't hear that that noise when your locomotive is venting excess steam. Some people don't like that just because it's to be honest, it is a fairly annoying noise. These two, GPU position horizontal and vertical, you shouldn't need to change these, but this changes where that little locomotive UI overlay goes on your screen. Enable icon cache. So if you turn this on and then restart Minecraft, I can't do that because of the weird sound system setup I have. But if you were to do that, it goes through and pre-generates. It pre-generates in Java icons of what the different trains should look like. It actually doesn't even use the GPU. It grabs the models and it renders them using Java geometry code, which is a little bit slow, and it takes 30 seconds to a minute. But that means that rendering the item models, instead of being these three-dimensional pieces here, which is a little bit slower, it's just I guess the best word would be a caricature of it. And I think my audio just dropped there, so I'll say it again. So it shows up as more of a caricature of what's actually here. But it renders a lot faster once you're actually in game. And I think it uses a little bit less memory too. All right, let's go back into mod options. Graphics. So yeah, if you're having issues opening up the UI and it's, like if you're looking at the creative menu and it's looking, it's really lagging out your computer, try enabling this option, but you have to restart Minecraft if you do. Enable item render priming. So what this does is, this says, hey, before the world actually loads in, go through and set up the models. This just means if you're loading into a huge rail yard, doing this ahead of time means that, hey, I'm going to load all the models first, and then once you're actually in game, they show up a lot faster. Or if you go to the user interface, they're just there instead of kind of popping in piece by piece. And that popping in piece by piece brings us to the next setting. So what my code does is, here, let me relog and I'll demonstrate this. So if I disconnect and reconnect, watch very carefully. No trains, and it pops in. That didn't illustrate it as well as I'd like. Usually what happens is, I'm going to try that again from this point of view. What happens is it defers it, so it does, all of the models are already loaded, that's the problem. If these models weren't already loaded, it would pop them in one by one by one. So you'd see the locomotives build themselves in real time. And what's happening behind the scenes, wait for the audio fix, okay. So what's happening behind the scenes is it's only allowing Immersive Railroading to create the core, the display list. It's only doing so much rendering, or I guess pre-rendering at a time. So whenever you're drawing a locomotive, and whenever you're drawing a specific component, it says, okay, so far in the past 60 milliseconds, I've used 1 millisecond of the total draw time. Therefore, I can continue rendering. But if I've used 4 milliseconds out of the 60, then I can't render anything else until the next tick of the code. So essentially what it means is it loads it piece by piece by piece by piece instead of trying to load it all at once. It kind of spreads the load out of loading all of the items in world and all the locomotives and all that in such a way to what's the best way to say this? What did I say here? Yeah, it prevents it from trying to do too much at once. So it does a little bit, then waits, then does a little bit, then waits to the next cycle, then does a little bit, then waits until everything is loaded into the game. Overhead GPU texture size, do not change this. This is something that I use to test stuff for lower resource computers. If you want to break stuff, play with that setting. Let's see, any comments? Sprites be better in the casting UI. Yeah, so this enable icon cache, that's the sprites. See, particles enabled, true, that's pretty self-explanatory. Trains on the brain, I don't need to tell you what that does. You should be able to figure it out. And shader-friendly render. Let me turn this off and show you. Nothing looks different. How about that? I'm not using a shader. If you're using a shader, that's not entirely true. It's running was running a little bit slower. This method of rendering is a little bit less efficient, but without getting too technical about it, there's two different ways that I do really nasty hacks to the Forge rendering system, and that toggles between them. If you're using a shader, I really recommend having that set to true. If you're not using a shader, it really doesn't matter. You can play with different versions, or if you're having issues where stock isn't showing up or blinking, you can play with that setting, but at the end of the day, they should be doing roughly the same thing under the hood, but just in different places. Cast all parts at once. It would be interesting to be able to add a backlog. I think I might rethink the whole way that castings work when I start playing with a mod that's tentatively titled Immersive Steelworks. I'm not sure if that'll be the name or not, but at some point in the next year or two, I want to play with doing a large-scale construction mod that goes a lot, that does a lot more than the basic stuff that I've done so far, and have Immersive Railroading depend on that. Okay. So let's go through all these settings. So you can see, and there's all this crap in here. None of these settings actually work. So the top three actually do stuff. All of these other ones are left over. During, I think it was like 0.4 point something or 0.5 point something, it was one of the last couple betas. I changed the way the config is laid out, so there's a couple different options here. These are leftovers. Forge decides to show them, but they don't do anything. You have to click on one of these to actually change settings. Let's go into damage. Trains break blocks. Self-explanatory. If a train is running through a tunnel and there's a lantern hanging down, it's going to break the block. Creative placement clears blocks. So if you're building in creative and you right-click, you can actually right-click through a mountain if you want. It'll place the track through. You should be able to figure that out. So like if you're making a tunnel in creative, you can just place down the track and it'll automatically clear the space for the train to go, and clear space for the tracks, which goes into this one, enables side block clearing. That means that by default, that clearing does a fairly large area. This makes that area a little bit smaller. If you're having trouble with slopes, try toggling this off for a little bit. Drop snowballs to false. If you're going through a snowy biome and you've got deep snow turned on, it just makes a huge mess and lags out your game. So by default, trains do not drop snowballs. Entity speed damage. So this let's see, what did I say? I actually haven't played with the setting in a while. So if you're so for every 10 for every 10 kilometers an hour, it does 1 heart of damage to the entity it hits. So if you set this to 100, even just if you set this to 100, you've got to be going really fast in order to be able to hurt someone. But if you set it to 1 and you hit someone at 10 miles an hour, it's just going to kill them instantly. That's like the Railcraft style. Oops, it touched me and I'm dead. I'm just poking fun. That was actually it was pretty neat the way they did that. But anyways, so if you wanted to do more damage, change it to a lower value. If you wanted to do less damage, change it to a higher value. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. Explosions enabled. What that means is when a boiler hits the code that says, "Oh crap, the crown sheet is melted and I've got way too much pressure, I need to explode," it doesn't actually break blocks. Probably for deep printer, this will be two different options. One will be explosions enabled, and one will be explosions destroy blocks. That way, you can have it so that your locomotive could hit 5 million degrees centigrade, and it wouldn't even break itself, depending on what you want to do. Require solid blocks. That right there is. So right now, let me show you what this means. What's not a solid block? Do I have any? Okay, these are not solid blocks. So fence posts are one example. Fence posts in Minecraft parlance are not marked as quote-unquote solid blocks. Where's my track tool? So if I were to try and place this train on, or this track on the fence, it lights up red. It can't do that. It says, nope, no way. So if you change this setting, then you could place your track here. It's as simple as that. You'll want to change that setting both client and server side. So plan to add tank engines. Tank engines and switchers, definitely. I'm still trying to figure out what's going to go in the base mod and what's going to go in resource packs. We've done a small step at that for 1.0, but that'll probably continue in one way or another in future versions. Okay, so that's that setting balance. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in here. But so all of these cost multipliers, this is the lower the value, the cheaper it is to place down a piece of track. The higher it is, the more expensive it is to place down a piece of track. I set them as reasonably cheap by default, at least in my view. But again, that's why they're config options. Change them if you want. Fuel required. This sets, well, if they need fuel or not. Model fuel required. So if you set that to false, model trains, you can run them without fuel. So this applies to all gauges. This only applies to model gauge. Millibuckets per liter. This changes. It's kind of funny. It changes. So in the configs, it's each locomotive says I have the capacity for let's say 5 buckets of fuel or 50 buckets of fuel. Or rather, so that's what's wrong. It says I've got 50 liters of fuel, and how many buckets that correspond to in game. That's what this configures. So you can change a setting and play around with it. It'll change how much fluid stuff can store by default. I think this can be a decimal. So I think what's the range on that? I'm not sure if that's a decimal or not. Block weight. This is 100 kilograms per block. And brake multiplier. Yes, this changes how realistic the braking is. Lower numbers are more realistic, because it usually takes a while for trains to slow down. One is kind of halfway between realistic and it just stops instantly. If you want it to stop instantly, set it to 100. If you want it to be realistic, set it to like 0.5 or 0.1. Diesel fuel efficiency, that's self-explanatory. Loco heat timescale. So this changes how fast the locomotive physics occur. Or rather, the steam locomotive physics occur. If it's a higher number, it heats up faster, but it also eats more fuel, and it uses a lot more water. So if you modify this, you may want to change local water usage. Play with this in a creative world, because if you do this wrong and you use up all your water, you could easily get an explosion. But if you want stuff to heat up faster, like double this value or triple it, as an example. If you set it to 1, it will actually take a full, like Minecraft, a full 24 hours real world to heat up and cool down the locomotives. So I already answered JEI support earlier, maybe for 3.0. For this mod, it doesn't really make that much sense. It's kind of self-documenting in world. If someone wants to hop on and help code that, I won't object to it, but that's not something I want to spend my time on. Steam fuel efficiency. This changes, so if you set this to 200, everything will take, I think it'll burn for twice as long, if I remember correctly. Water usage, how fast it uses water. I'm not sure if that's inverted or not. Slope multiplier. So this changes how much a gradient impacts the speed of a train. So description's pretty straightforward. Track floating percent. Okay, so this is currently set to 0.05. Let me demonstrate this. Wait, is that right? I think that's not default. And that is okay. So by default, that's 5% of the tracks. Okay, that's why. So it's so what I can do right here. Well, that didn't work. Alright, let's set this to 40. This is a feature that's still a tad buggy at the moment. Oops. Set you to standard gauge. Okay, so this should work now. That's not working. That's pretty funny. Apparently that code is still buggier than I thought. What should be happening is you should be allowed to break a few of the pieces of track without serious repercussions. It should allow you to be able to break like one of the pieces under here so you can place the tube. I did it here. I forget what's going on here. What I would recommend is in your config changes to a slightly higher value. Alright, I've got no idea why this isn't working. Guess that's on the list of things to fix for the patch release. Let me place this back down. Oh, don't use a drill for that? I thought I was only breaking one piece at a time. I hit shift held down. Okay. Anywho, that's in theory what should happen. I'm not sure why it's not working the way it's supposed to. Alright, we're getting through here. I know this is probably not the most exciting thing in the world, but it is important to go through at some point. Okay, we're almost done through this. Track floating, that's in theory what that should do, but it's not working as it's supposed to. Traction multiplier. If you want more wheel slip, set this to a low value. If you want less wheel slip, set it to a higher value. Conductor distance. If you want villagers to come from far and wide and board your train, set that to like 200 or something. You can set the villager payout item. So this is Minecraft Emeralds. You can set it to be like Minecraft Iron Ingot as example. And payout per meter. By default, this is one thing, and it randomizes between whatever you have in this list. One of these per kilometer. So you'll put the villagers on a train using the conductor's whistle, ship into wherever you want to go, and then hit shift whistle, and they'll disembark from the train, and you'll get paid whatever is owed you. You also can't, so if you just drive them in a circle over and over and over again, that doesn't count. You actually, it's the distance is as the crow flies, so it's distance from point to point, not actually distance traveled by rail directly. Okay, and debug. We are almost done, I promise. I promise. Coupler range. That's kind of a funky option, which if you're having issues with model scale, set that to a lower number. The coupling is essentially the distance between the couplers that they'll auto-snap together. Infinite liquid setting, debug log, turn that on if you want to send me a trace report if something's breaking in a really weird way. Deep snow, I'm actually surprised I have that turned off. I like that setting. That means that snow accumulates on the tracks. Keep stock loaded, that forces chunk loading for all stock even when it's not loaded. So for example, if I were to leave right now, those trains, if it wasn't force loaded by my other chunk loading, are supposed to unload. It doesn't always do that perfectly, but it usually does. Mod options, go back in here, config. Okay. OpenComputer pull to latex. This is a server setting. So this says how often the OpenComputer connected augments can pull for stock updates. Leave this at 1 unless you start noticing that you're using hundreds of computer augments and are starting to run into TPS issues. I highly doubt this will ever be a problem, but I put it in here just for server owners, just in case. Snow melt rate, you can set it like, so one thing is if you have a mod like Winter Wonderland, you can set it so that snow accumulates and then it melts. But snow can accumulate on the tracks, but you have to set this to some value server side or on client side if you're playing single player. And it'll mean that the snow on the tracks melt over time, which is pretty cool. All right, that is all the config options. Any questions on all of the crazy stuff? Not crazy, all the crazy number of options I've gone over. All right. I think there's a 5 or 6 second delay, so I'll just kind of wander around for a sec. Any questions from anyone online? Okay, moving on. Now we're getting back into the fun parts. This is going to go over some of the Augment system. Sorry for that noise I was adjusting the monitor. Okay. So let's do this without OpenComputers first. Let me steal a lever from downstairs. I'm going to put my levers. Alright, it's running, so I'm going to sleep through the night real quick. That should help with the FPS drop issue. Okay, someone's asking, is there a way to turn off shift left click in order to remove locos and rail cars? Not really at the moment. There's been some suggestions on there's been some suggestions on that for 2.0, and that should help with servers where you want you just want people to drive trains, not be able to build and destroy them in certain areas. I might add something in for 2.0, but I don't have anything concretely planned yet. Yep. Okay. So let me fuel up this locomotive. Boom. And I'm going to steal some of this redstone because I'm not actually using it at this point. Excuse me, sorry. Alright, so right now the train is marked as being over the augment. That's apparently a little bit finicky in model gauge. I'll have to take a look at that. But you can see the default mode is when the stock is over it, it outputs a redstone signal either 0 or 15. And I did not grab a redstone torch because I don't plan ahead. See, block weight determines how items are on rolling stock. Yes, that's true. That's correct. Alright, so if I right-click on this, now it's detecting the speed. That's not going to be super useful because the gauge is so small. Probably weren't able to see that, but it did light up a little bit. If you set this up on a full-scale track and let it go... Actually, you know what? Let me just do that. I'll let this... Alright, so... Go around. See how it's lighting up a little bit? Alright. Let me... Actually, this will be a good opportunity. Set that to break. There we go. So what you saw right there is if I hop on here, the brake is set at 0, flip the lever, brake is set at full. And I can cycle this through the different options. Horn mode, which can get really annoying in model gauge. Computer mode, which actually doesn't really do anything. Throttle forward, throttle reverse, and brake. All right, so you can see how you could set up a few of these in different scenarios, along with the detectors, in order to show, in order to detect, hey, there's a train coming this way, we need to flip a switch, or hey, we're coming into a station, let's kill the throttle and put the brake on. So use a redstone again. You use a redstone torch to cycle through these options. All right, so let's set this back to default. So the default option here is stock. Let me plop this down. Turn you off. That's off, right? Yep. Okay, so let's set, so detecting speed. Let's show that. Number of passengers. I hop on. Redstone level is 1. There's 1 passenger. Switch it to cargo percentage full. So if I were to put that in there, it goes up to about 50% because there's 2 slots. And if we do that, there we go. This is helpful if you're doing like automated loading, and so you can set up like a bunch of, so here's an example. If you're doing a rail yard, you can set up near your item loaders, sorry, waiting for audio to get back. Okay, so you can set up item loaders with a fullness detector on there. That way, when you're at the front of the train and driving it, you can see all the way back where the cars are, if the current car is full or not yet. Liquid percentage full. That's pretty full. Not full at all. Pretty full. Not full at all. Pretty full. Also, if you didn't know, mining drills can kind of double as a bucket with this, which is actually quite useful because they run on the same fuel as the locomotives. And back to the first mode. There we go. So that's the basics of the augment system. And I've shown the loader augments in previous streams, so I'm not going to go over that as much now. So at this point, I'm going to break for any other questions, and then I'm going to go into some of the open computer stuff. All right. Actually, let me ask here. Questions? Okay, no questions at this point. Let's move on to the Lua stuff. All right, so let's exit out of this real quick. So I'll just boot this up from scratch. So I've fully built an open computer. This is tier 2. I've installed from the floppy. So I can turn it on. I've already answered that question. JEI support is not coming anytime soon. Asking additional times is not going to help your case. All right, back on the augment system. So I can type in components, hit enter, and you can see we've got IR augment control and IR augment detector. So that corresponds to both of these. Let me clear these out real quick. You know what? I have, right, I stored some fuel in one of these. So I have these adapters here. These are from OpenComputers. What these do is they say, hey, I'm sitting on top of a track with something that can that I can interface with. Let's add it to the network. So because of those, this computer can see these augments and it can work with them. So here's the idea that I don't usually use that, but that's just something fun to note. I'm going to run demessage, and I'm going to run this back and forth a little bit. Oh, right, because I've got the brakes set on full. So you can see we now have a couple events here. So we've got IR train overhead, and you can subscribe to these events. I won't go over that, but if you want to look up event polling and event subscribing in the OpenComputers docs, you can use those events. Excuse me, my voice is cutting out a little bit. You can use these events to interface with the trains automatically. So instead of sitting there and just waiting, hey, is there anything overhead? Is there anything overhead? You can say, you can just have you can have the computer just wait for you there. So the first thing is the event name. The second piece is the ID of this augment. You can that's something you'll use if you look up the event API, and then it tells you what type it is. So this is a local. So it hit detector, then local control, then local control. I'm going to back this up just a tad. Let me set this back into computer mode. God, I hate that horn pitched up like that. Okay, so let's exit out of that. There we go. Okay, so now that we've got the idea of we've got these components in the system, we can actually interact with them. So it's as simple as components, component.IR augment detector, and you can hit enter, and it tells you what functions are listed here. So we can call info, and that tells you this information here. So the brake is set to 1, the cargo percentage is 0% full. There's 2 cargo slots. Let me copy paste in a little code snippet. The ... down at the bottom means that there's more that could be there that isn't. So let's do that. And here's a better view of the settings. So cargo percentage is 0, traction, weight, all this stuff. This ID is unique. So this is actually this is the name internally to Immersive Railroading of what this thing is, what the locomotive is called, and these fields either exist or don't exist. So if I were to drive the tank car over, the properties would change. So you can see we've got speed, fluid max, and fluid amount. And audio's back. Audio's been glitching a little bit. I suspect that's the Wi-Fi. All my audio is being streamed over the Wi-Fi from my laptop to my desktop in a very odd fashion. So that's 3542. And if I run that again, 3530. So you can see it's eating up the fuel. Let's see. So there's all sorts of fun stuff you can do here. You can use those to make display screens. You can get all sorts of information about, all right, so the next thing is consist. This is a useful function. So this says there's 7 cars in the train. Is currently bearing, the direction it's been moving is south. It's not going anywhere. And how much tractive effort is applied to the rails due to the current throttle, and what the current weight of all of the cars are. So that's 48,301. So let's say I do that and take some fluid out. It's now 45, it's less. And you can refer to the individual pieces. So if we only wanted the cars, we do .cars. Or cars. It helps if I spell right. It's hard to program in front of a camera. Can do weight kilograms. There we go. And it's going down because it's burning fuel ever so slowly. So the next thing we can do is take a look at get tag. So someone asked a question earlier, I forget who, asked about sorry, audio's doing weird stuff. Sorry, someone had asked about how you can set names for different locomotives and stuff. So this is the method that's currently supported. So get tag by default it just sets it to just empty string, empty words. But you can set it, and let's set it to loco stream. There we go. And get tagged. So that's always going to return loco stream until you set it to something else. So let's say you've got a train coming along, and you've got all of your cars and your locomotive tagged as freight yard, or whatever it ends up being. You can detect that with a computer and have it output a redstone signal using a redstone card, and flip a switch. So this is, if you want to do some really complex routing, this allows you to do pretty much everything you'd want to do. All right. So the next step is how you actually control a locomotive. So you've got this augment control, and this has a lot of the same functions. It's got the horn function. This is the easiest one. God, I've got to fix that. It pitches just wrong. You can set brake, and this is on a range from 0 to 1, so you can do 0.5. And if I hop on, the brake is currently at half. Let's set it. Let's turn the brake all the way on. Brake is full on. Let's set the throttle. So the throttle is a little bit different. So if I set the throttle to -1, it's going to start going backwards. Set it to 0 sets it to neutral. And setting it to 1 makes it go forward again. There you go. That's what you need to control locomotives. That's actually a lot of what I wanted to cover. Actually, getting in and programming all this stuff gets a little bit more complicated. And I'll actually, let me go show one of the more complicated examples now. I'll actually need to modify the program, so this is a good time. I got fuel in there. So this still hasn't hit full pressure. I'm gonna that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Gazer29 is suggesting that I create an OpenComputers channel in Discord. I will do that after the stream. So let's get you warming up a little bit. I can't really do that because I've got water automatically being piped in from underneath. So I can't do that trick. Let's do this. I'm going to leave a couple slots empty. All right, so let's fuel. Okay, so this is a basic OpenComputer script. What this is designed to do is keep a locomotive at this point 150 psi. You can change that down below. I can paste in this code at some point later on. If someone can, if you go to the CurseForge page for Immersive Railroading, the Discord link is at the bottom of the description. And if someone wants to paste that in chat, I can't hop over there at the moment. But if someone could paste that in the chat, that'd be awesome. So these first two things are just basic programming things to say, hey, we need access to these components. This says this is an access to the redstone component. This is access to the detector augment. The side is actually that has to change. Hang on. Computers. Okay, so I had that set to 3. This is I rebuilt this area, so 3 used to be where it was supposed to output. I've got redstone underneath now, so I need to set this to 0 for the bottom. Okay, so side is 0, off is, okay, so these are just the redstone off and redstone on values. It makes it a little bit more readable. So this is the burn time of a piece of coal. This is because of a config option I have. And the burn time divided by 20 is that, so this is number of ticks, and then it converts it to number of seconds. So the burn time is the total burn time of a piece of coal in seconds. And then this is the target pressure. This while thing means run the following code forever, which is this piece. And so what it does is it gets the current info for the what's overhead, turns off the redstone underneath. If there's nothing overhead, if there's no train overhead, the info will just be nil. But if the info is not nil, and it has pressure, and the pressure is less than the pressure we want, then we print add fuel, then we set the redstone output to on, sleep for 2 seconds, set the redstone off, and then wait for the burn time. So this toggled the redstone off and on with a little break in between. That allows the hopper to run. And let me show you how this piece fits together. So I have this hopper here with coal in it, and underneath I've got a torch which keeps it always on. But underneath that, let me dig down into the basement. And I've got to fuel this up again. Lucky for me, I've got fuel out here. Alright, so I've got redstone going to that torch, so when this redstone turns on, the hopper is allowed to go. And then I've got the Augment wired up using one of these adapters and some networking cable. Stick the torch down here. Okay. Okay, so what it does is it says we're adding fuel, lets the hopper go, waits for 0.2 seconds, then it turns the hopper back off, and then waits for the whole piece of fuel to burn, and then it tries again. So it keeps doing this over and over and over again until this condition is met right here. All right, so let's save and close. Okay, there's the audio seemed to derp out there for a sec. That's funny. Okay, so we can run Lua, fuel.lua, and it's adding fuel. So you can see now that slot started burning just then. So it added a piece of coal right there, and that's gonna burn for a while, but it's gonna keep this additional slot full of fuel. So I could sit here and wait for this to heat up, but eventually, so the maximum is 185. Sorry. So 150 is below that maximum. So it'll stop adding a piece of fuel it'll stop adding a piece of coal every once in a while once it hits 50 degrees. So this is it's a handy little script to keep your locomotives in a siding full of fuel, but not wasting fuel and water. If you're in creative, it really doesn't matter, but if you're in survival, it's actually it's pretty useful. So just go over the augment. This yellow one, not yellow, this greenish yellow one, that's the item loader. The red one is the detector, and the blue one is the water loader. And I've got a similar pipe running underneath to that, so this stays full of water from this tank. And this tank is refilled using this pump. That's awesome, Last Man Gamer. I've never heard someone buying a game because of a mod I wrote before. That's incredible. I'm really glad and you did, and hope you enjoy. All right, it's 5 o'clock here. So that's been streaming for about an hour and a half now. let's see. I'm going to ask in chat just because of the latency is almost 30 seconds now. I am almost done. Does anyone want to see the... Okay. All right. So I'm going to break here for questions, and I'll probably end the stream with just doing a tour of my world. So this world is, I always say it wrong, Dooglamoo Worlds. I've got to contact the guy who wrote it and see how you're supposed to pronounce it. But so I'm using that mod, and I'm using that in conjunction with Prospectus. So I'll show off Prospectus a little bit more once I head out a little bit further. All right, another coder joining me in the project, just asked by, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce that. I'm going to call you Illy. Another coder is always welcome. I essentially burnt myself out getting to 1.0. The code is actually, considering it's Minecraft, reasonably organized and doesn't need a huge amount of refactoring, but it could always use another set of eyes. There's a ton of features that people are always asking for that I just don't have time to implement. The code is on GitHub. It's GPL licensed, so you should be able to do you should be able to do almost whatever you want with it. So give me a shout on Discord, or just submit a pull request if you want. I've had people submit pull requests for things like translates and stuff. All right. So we'll go down this way first. I've got to stop here because there's a side branch. It's going to be a little bit more jumpy than usual because my computer's not super happy about the fact that I'm recording. Let's see, signals added to the mod. That's a maybe. I think there's a couple of people working on signals mod, and honestly, if that's separate from Immersive Railroading, that's easier for me. I've just got a small coal mine going off in that area. See, ORT is asking about diesel locomotives with an off switch. Yeah, I'll be adding that eventually. But when I do that, I'll also be adding heat up time, because right now your diesel locomotives can go from completely cool and just sitting there to ready to output full horsepower in a fraction of a second. I'll probably add a bit of a warm-up time. That way it balances a little bit better with the steam locomotives. Sorry, pig. That pig is now dinner. I may end up switching out locomotives when I get back. The E6 is actually quite a bit faster. All right, so this is why one of the reasons why I love this world gen is because I've had to travel all the way to here to find a good source of redstone and silver. This wasn't a good source of silver. This was a good source of copper, uranium, and a few other things. You can see, it doesn't tell me where it is. It just tells me in this general area, there's some silver to look for, there's some uranium and some iron. And as I go down here, you can see it's finding some new ores and stuff. So this was, yeah, down this way. Computer's not super happy. This is where the copper mine was, and there's a ton of redstone down there which I could go collect, but I'm not gonna. So this is one of my mining outposts. What I usually do is I'll come down here, use up all the fuel in the drill, and fill up the freight car, and then refill the drill in here and go mining. So I'll go mining for a good half an hour to an hour at a time, fill everything up, and then head back. Ouch. Oh, one thing I forgot to show, this is going to hurt, is loading and unloading animals. I'll show that when I get back to the main base. Steam Master Gaming, I talked about that a little bit earlier. 2.0 will have an optional damage and use system. So if you're breaking blocks with the train, it'll damage the parts. If you even just using the boilers, over time parts will need to be replaced depending on how much the locomotives have used, how much they've been rained on, stuff like that. How much of that will actually be in 2.0, I'm not entirely sure, but it will be in some shape or form. Yeah, this locomotive only has 1,000 horsepower. It's not compared to some other locomotives, it's not super strong. Let's come back over here. All right. Oops. All right, so real quick, one thing that I should have shown is how to load and unload animals. So shift click, and then shift click again. Come on. And then it drops the lead. And now that animal is sitting there. You can't even actually interact with the animal. It's not actually even a living animal. It's just it's kind of a fake thing that's been put there. All right, let's see how warm this locomotive is. That's probably enough. There we go. Normally this is a lot smoother. I apologize. This is going to be a little bit hacky because my audio is being routed weird. I'm really going to try to get a proper mic for the next stream. Oop, I actually wanted to stop here. All right, so just as an example, I dug this tunnel, but then I noticed there's a ton of iron here. So I dug down here, and this is the sort of, you need to dig a lot to build these railways. And this is where Dooglamoo shines. I know I'm saying that wrong. But you find these rich ore pockets, and it's so much better than vanilla. It takes a lot to get there and get back, but once you've set up and you've got a full world going, it makes mining a huge amount of fun. You can see I've got a bookmark up there. It also forces you to build a rail system to get to all the different ore deposits around the world. I don't really have any. So Last Man as Gamer is asking, am I going to add new track types? I don't really have too many plans for that at this point. Maybe at some point. OpenFlexitrack is the next thing I'm going to be focusing on. Each engine have separate horns. Eventually, the problem is I've got to find horn sounds that I'm not going to get sued for. So all the sounds in the game are currently licensed under, hi cow, Creative Commons, which means that As long as I give proper attribution, I can use them in the mod without trouble. I also want to fix it so this whole area would fill with smoke particles because they aren't glitching through the roof. I might try and get that in for 2.0. So so you can see how much iron there is here. So tons of iron, tons of silver. This is the sort of operations you need to make a railway. That'll be the last tour of a mining facility. Let's keep heading up on this way. Yeah, actually, I just finished this tunnel before I tried streaming the first time. Yeah, normally this is a lot smoother, but considering that I'm streaming, it's I'm streaming, I'm watching YouTube, and I'm piping the audio through 2 different computers. So the fact that it's running this smoothly is good enough for me. And the whole reason I'm coming out this way is because I found diamonds over there. Diamonds are actually quite hard to find in Dooglamoo Worlds, but once you find them, there's a good amount of them there. So I did a ton of exploring to find this. Come on. We're almost to the end. And we're at the end. So we've gone... How far did we go? Let's see, do I have a waypoint back that way? That's even further. Waypoints. Let's turn this one on. I think that terracotta is this one all the way. Yep. So it's about another 500 meters past that, but this rail line is it not even showing it? Terracotta. So probably overall it's about 3.5 kilometers. It's not bad. Let's see. More comments. Going online. Yeah. So yeah, you've got to be very careful with making sure the mods are legally set up. If anyone's heard of Pixelmon, that had recently bit the dust because they didn't license that properly. How are we doing? More water. All right, let's highball it back to the station. Yeah, I'll be putting in fancier bridges for this whole area. But I've traversed this whole distance on horse before, and it takes half an hour to an hour just just to do it, and you're driving the damn thing the whole the whole time. It's ridiculous. And then you've got to worry about, oh no, there's a monster. I've got to avoid it. The train just plows right through him, like that cow there. You actually get a lot of food just driving around the world because animals like wandering on the tracks. I kind of want to have it so that when you fire off the horn, all the animals around run away. So I think for this locomotive is about as fast as it'll go. But we're cruising. I actually got to start slowing down. Uh-oh, not the way I wanted to go. Also, something new is you can see where you're supposed to put the switch. Last Man Gamer, that's an excellent question. That already happens. I've actually forgot to mention that. If the rails are wet, your traction goes down significantly. God, can't get anything right today. I gotta check my points. Yeah, so if you've got a nice long train that you can just barely pull, and it starts running, you better not stop this. You won't be able to get started again. Are we over? We are over. You see this slot is burning again because it's keeping at least one piece of coal in there at all time. You can see it's adding fuel. And it'll eventually hit 145. We'll actually hit that pretty quickly, interestingly enough. And then it'll stop putting fuel in there. I think I'm going to call it quits for today. It's been a fun stream. Thanks for hanging out. Does anyone have any other questions before I sign off for the night? Actually, let me ask in chat because this is, seems to be a decent delay. Sorry, Adam, I don't have the bigger boy installed at this point. That is just ridiculous in size. I was the one who modeled the original big boy, so I've got a soft spot for that. Custom track models, Adam asks, definitely 2.0. I do want to add that I just ran out of time for 1.0. The goal for 1.0 wasn't necessarily that I'm done developing this mod. It was more of, A, I need a break for a couple months. B, I need something stable that people can use without the world's corrupting or blowing up. So it has to be stable and relatively bug-free. And 3, I had to stop at some point. Otherwise, I wouldn't have actually ever released a final 1.0 version. So, cool. All right. Well, that is it for tonight. Thanks everyone for hopping on, and I will try to do these more often now that I'm not going pell-mell fixing bugs and adding new stuff. See you around on Discord.